In the previous video, we imported our iBot character, assigned materials, and packed it to get ready for Apex rigging. So now let's actually get started with the auto rig builder. So I'm going to put down an auto rig builder component. Open it up, hover over the viewport and press enter. Okay, so now we are in the rig state. And before I really jump in here, I'm going to hit exit. I'm going to try to give myself a little bit more real estate in my screen. So I'm going to collapse some of these windows here just to kind of give myself more space to work. Let's jump back into the rig state. And here we go. So when you first open the rig builder, it comes in on the top right here. What I like to do is actually kind of like to lay it across the bottom of the screen. Okay. So now that I have it down here, we can go ahead and get started and just start dragging on some of these components. So when you start, you want to get going with the root. Okay, so I'm going to drop the root down. And you see when I drag a component, it automatically wants to connect to the nearest joint. Okay, so I'm going to hit yes. So if I select the auto rig builder, we can actually see that a multi-parm instance was created for our root. Now, there's a couple of issues with our root, right? Because it was parented to this football, and we don't want that. So if I drop down this advanced, we can see that the actual football is under the parent. Now, there's not too much issue with that. So, for instance, if I hit this double arrow here, this will update the actual rig. And we can see now that the control was created, and I can grab it and start moving it around. So it's working. And if I want to reset the actual test rig, I can just hit N, and then I'll set everything back to the center. So just to keep things tidy, I'm going to remove this L football from the parent and make sure that this root is at the absolute 0 position. Now, when you create a component, it automatically comes with these little gear icons, okay? And what these do is they allow you to configure the actual component. So it gives you this nice little GUI where you can configure your component in different ways. And it really comes down to how the TD sets this up. So, for instance, we have a number controls parameter here, which I can select. And as I drag through here, I'm on a Wacom tablet, by the way. And you can do this with the middle mouse button, but I like doing this with a Wacom tablet. So for instance, if I select the 4, that'll create 4 controls, okay, for the root control here. But it's not doing it because we're not updating the rig. So what we can do is just hit this auto update. And now as we start selecting the number of controls, it'll update automatically. So let's leave this at 2, and we'll also leave auto update on so that we can see what's happening with our rig as we're working. The next component we're going to use is the spine. So let's grab the spine and let's drag it onto the cog here. Now, we can see that we're running into an issue where it wants to run down the leg, right? So let's X that out. And if I were to drag the spine onto here, we'd see that it's working correctly. But the problem is that I want the spine to start from here, okay? Not from there, from here, because I want the center of gravity to be on the hip joint right there, or on the pelvis joint. I'm going to drop it on there and hit yes. So now it actually created the spine going down the leg, which is odd. and that's not what we want. So let's go to our multi-parm instance of the spine. We'll open that up. We can see here on the right, we can actually select the exact joints we want the spine to affect. So let's go ahead and fix that. If I hover over these joints, I can see that it's spine 0, spine 1, spine 2, etc. So let's go ahead and just manually put these in. So spine 0, I'm going to copy that and just paste it. We can see that our rig vanished, but don't worry. Let's just power through this. And once we get to spine 3, the rig comes back and everything is working. We notice that we actually had these control configurations over here on the actual rig. And these are animatable controls, okay? So these configuration controls are for configuring the component, and these are for configuring the actual rig, okay? So if I select this, I can see that I have a stretch option here. So if I move this around, it doesn't stretch, and if I extend this, it'll stretch. Okay, so pretty nice. I'll hit N to go back to the rest position. All right, so now that we have our spine, let's get the leg on there. So I'll just drag the leg on there and hit yes. Okay, so now we have IK legs. But we've run into an issue where the pole vectors are pointed off to the side of the legs. All right, so as we lift up the IK, the leg is bending off to the side, which obviously is not what we want. Hit N, and let's actually think about what's happening here. We're going to look at our joints. Now, the rest position of the joints is the root of our problem because the joints are completely straight. There's no bend in the joints. And the IK component works by looking for a slight bend in the limb, whether it be an arm or a leg. And it uses that bend to determine where to put the pole vector and how to tell the IK component to bend. So before we actually go into the pack character, we can actually just manually bend our model, or rather our skeleton, a little bit to explicitly tell where and when the IK components to bend. So outside of Apex, back with KinEffects, we'll use a rig pose. And I'll hit enter. And now I'm going to select the arm joints because we're going to run into the same problem with the arms. So we'll just go ahead and take care of that. So with the elbows selected, let's just bend them very, very slightly. And it doesn't need to be anything dramatic, right? It could be just a real subtle bend. Great. So let's do the knees now. Select the knees. We'll bend these slightly as well. So if I go back to the auto rig builder, hit enter. Let's go to the rig, and we'll see that the actual pole vectors are exactly where we want them to be, right in front of the knee. But this brings us into another issue, because since we've offset the joints are now offset from where they were originally meant to be. So when I made the skeleton here, these joints were right in the center of this gear, of this little gear geometry there, right? Right there. Now they're back over here. So that means that we need to apply this transform, right? This slight adjustment to the skeleton to the actual geometry. Okay, so let's jump back out of the state again. Make some room. And I'm going to put down a bone deform. Okay. The bone deform takes 3 inputs. So we'll do our geometry first, the rest position of, or rather the capture pose. And now we want the animated pose. All right. And we're going to put this into the third position. So if I flip back and forth between these, you can see that we're slightly bending our model and we're getting those offsets. And now we can plug this into the geo. But one very important thing to uncheck with the bone deform is this delete capture attributes. We want those. We don't want to delete them. Otherwise, our rig won't work. So let's turn that off. And we can jump back to the auto rig, hit enter. If we take a look at our joint here, we can see that it's right back where it's supposed to be. Now that we have the leg, let's go ahead and add the foot. So we'll take the foot component and we'll just drag it right onto the ankle and hit yes. Cool. So let's go to the rig and see what was just made. And now we have a foot roll rig with several different controls. We have tilt controls, and we even have an animation control where we have some sliders that we can actually animate some rolls and some tilts. Problem is that the actual pivots of the tilts are all over the place. So let's go back to the template skeleton, or our template rig, and let's get all of these pivots into place. Okay, so I'm going to grab this XZ plane here and just move that out. All right, and I want to get these kind of like right in the corner of our foot here, just like that. Okay, let's do the same thing for the heel. Great. Let's jump back to the rig, and we can see now that everything is working. Now, there is a bit of an issue because when we made our adjustments to the rig or to the skeleton, now our rest position for the feet are not exactly where we want them to be, right? And this will be an issue for the animator for when they're animating and they just want to reset the foot. It's not at a natural rest position, right? It's kind of bending forward a little bit. So why don't we adjust that skeleton again to make sure that the feet are at a good rest position, okay? So let's go back to the rig pose. Actually, let's go to the bone deform and let's have that open. We'll select the rig pose, hover over the viewport and hit enter. Okay, cool. Let's select the ankles. And I'm going to hit space and I think it's 4. So you can cycle through these views by holding down space and 2, 3, 4. So 4 is the one we want because we want to look at it from the side. And we're just going to get that right at the, try to straighten it out just like that. And then let's look at the front. You can see that they're kind of tilted a little bit inwards or outwards. So let's kind of tilt that just a bit like that. There we go. So now they're at a good rest position. And if we go back to the auto rig builder again, the rig will be updated. Great. So we can also make our adjustments again to these pivots just to get them exactly where we want. Just like that. Awesome. So the next component we're going to drag and drop onto our character is the arm. So since the test rig and the template rig are overlapping, I'm just going to move the robot back a little bit. Oh. And since we did that, we can see that we ran into a new issue. Our IK or our IK legs and the feet controls are not following the rest of the rig. So let's hit N and let's figure out what's going on. Oh, collapse that. And let's look at the foot multi-palm instance. So we'll open up the advanced tab. So the issue is the actual parent here. We do not want to parent to the knee. We want to parent to the C layout here. So let's delete this. When we look at the foot configuration control, select it, there's an icon here where we can actually select the parent of the foot. So let's select that. And now we have access to all of our rig controls where we can actually select where we want the parent to be. And we want the parent to be the C layout. So I'll select it and hit enter. And now if I move my C layout, the foot rig and the leg IK move along with everything. So now that we have that, let's do our arms. I'm going to grab the arm here and just drag it on. Great. So now we have arm, IK. And since we made the adjustment to our rest skeleton before, the IK pole vector is in the correct place. So you can see all of these extra controls inside of, or rather in between the elbow and in between the elbow and shoulder. And these are the twist controls, right? So the arm component creates all of these nice twist controls. But we don't need these because this is a robot rig. And the way I skin the robot, we're not going to need any of these twist controls. And they're going to get in the way for the animator because if I try to box select the IK handle, or if I try to box select the pole vector, I'll probably select these twist controls as well. So we don't need these. So within the arm configuration, right, in our template rig, let's actually move this. Let's get that out of the way. Let's select the control here, and we'll look for, let's see, the use twist, and we'll turn that off. Awesome. So now we don't have twist on our arms anymore, and we can do the same for the legs. We can get rid of those twists as well. Great. Let's hit N to reset the rig. So now that we have the arms in place, let's get the hand in there. So let's actually move the rig back again so that we can see our hand. And I'm going to use the hand simple component. I'm going to drag it right onto the wrist. And now this component's pretty nice because it actually knows how many fingers the character has, right? So it's smart enough to create the rig according to the amount of fingers. So this was the default is 5, obviously, but this is a 4-fingered character, and the component made 4 fingers. So that's pretty nice. So if we look at the actual rig that was created, we have these kind of mushroom-looking controls extending up from the knuckles, and these are nice because if you select these, they select the chain of the corresponding finger, right? So if you really want to just quickly select all of the controls, you can do so. You can select the controls individually, and that's pretty nice. And it does the same thing for all of the fingers. Okay. All right. Now that we have that, let's not reset the rig just yet because I wanted to do one more thing. I'm going to turn on this nice configuration here called piano hands. All right, so we'll turn that on. And what this does is, let's grab our config control here. So what this does is it sets up IK for each of our separate fingers, right? So now we have this FK IK switch. So I can select this, and now we have IK on our fingers, okay? But you can see that as I move the IK around, it's just bending in whichever way it pleases. Now, this is the same issue that we ran into with the arm and the knee. So this needs to be fixed in the rest pose. So I'm going to hit N to go back to the center, exit the state, and we'll go to this rig pose. Let's open up the Bone Deform. And I'm going to select all the fingers. Well, I'm going to select the main fingers first. And yeah, sometimes you kind of have to, yeah, sometimes it's kind of difficult to select the fingers with the rig pose. Okay, cool. So I get all of those. And let me shift select all of these. Okay, so now all of my main fingers are selected. And I'm just going to put a slight bend into the fingers. And now I'm going to do the same thing for the thumb. Okay, let's try that again. There we go. Come on. All right, you can just select them individually. Okay, there we go. And now we'll bend these. All right, let's exit the state. Let's jump back down to the auto rig builder. Jump back in. Now let's look at the piano hands and see how that's looking. So I can select all these, and now everything is bending correctly. Okay, so our rig is pretty much ready to go. In the next video, we're gonna go over how to configure and style the controls directly within the rig builder.